had the chance to choose again, would you choose LSE a second time? Did you find that LSE lived up to its reputation of having a bad social life? Do you regret having a shared room? What was the worst thing about first year? Hi guys, my name is Imogen. I'm a first year student who is going into second year at the London School of Economics. I currently study geography with German, and I thought today I could bring you a little review of my first year at LSE. Now, I asked for questions over on my Instagram for this video and I received so many, but some of them were more general about like advice for other first year students. So I've decided to do that as a separate video. So if your question doesn't come up today, it'll be in next week's video instead. So definitely do check that one out. I split this video into 4 sections and the first one of those is social. And the first question I've got here is, did you find that LSE lived up to its reputation of having a bad social life? Now, this is probably not the best question to start on because I feel like I can't properly answer this because I've spent an awful lot of this year at home, and so I have had a really bad social life in terms of meeting other people from LSE, but that is more due to the pandemic than it is due to the university, and I think if I went to any other UK university I'd actually find the same thing given the amount of time that I've actually been at home instead of in halls. I obviously have quite a few friends who stayed in London, and actually I think they've had a really good social life this year. And going forwards, I was feeling quite stressed about next year and how I'm going to manage it all, because obviously this year I've only really had to focus on my academic because there hasn't really been a question of whether I had a social life or not. And so going into next year, I was like, oh my word, where am I going to find this time from? But I've worked all year, and when I go back to London, obviously I'll have all that time that I would have been working back again. So some weeks that's 30 or 40 hours. And if I plugged 30 or 40 hours into my social life, I am sure I would have a great time. The next question is, did you meet many people outside of your accommodation or your course? No, I didn't, because the main way that I met people this year was either because I was living with them when I was up in London and we were actually in lockdown, so I wasn't legally allowed to meet people from other households at that point, or because I've obviously been on Zoom rooms with them and the only people that I'm on Zoom with are the people on my course because that's what I have from university. So I haven't met many people who don't do my course or aren't from my accommodation, but I think if I was living in London and we didn't have the lockdown rules, then I probably would have done, because the way it kind of works is you'll meet somebody and then they'll go, oh, I'm going out with my friend so-and-so tonight, do you want to come? And then you end up meeting someone from a different course, doing something different. And societies, I think, are a great way to meet other people. But linked to that, the next question is, which societies did you join? I didn't join any societies for the first probably term, and then I think in January I joined Geography Society, and they had a few online things, but it was obviously all people on my course because it's the Geography Society. And then later in the year I joined International Media and Journalism Society, and then I actually went onto the committee for that. So now I do social media for the society, but we haven't had any in-person events, but that is a way that I've met students from other courses. I have a few friends from, I think, history, international relations, who are all on the committee for international media and journalism. The next section is academic, and the first question here is, did you suffer with imposter syndrome? Well, the question came from somebody who's starting in September, so they said, I don't think I'm smart enough to be at LSE in September. Oh my word, did I suffer with imposter syndrome? Yes. Before I went to LSE, I actually wasn't that stressed about how I was going to feel when I was there and whether I'd feel clever enough to be there, but Michaelmas term wasn't too bad for this, I think, because I was just getting used to everything. I didn't really have time to think about how I was doing academically. And then as we went into Lent term, so that's the second term of uni, so January through to March, it got so much worse. I think this is also linked to me being at home, because I wasn't with students and I wasn't doing my work with other people. It was like, if I stop working now, are they going to be working still, and am I going to then be falling behind, and then I'm going to be behind everyone else? Like, I just had a really negative mentality basically about uni, and it led to me feeling like I just wasn't clever enough to be at LSE. I think going into second year, I'm in a much better position to deal with it and just be like, look, Imogen, you've got in. Like, even people going into first year, like, you've got into LSE, so that means that you deserve to be there. Regardless of what grade you're getting when you get there, like, you deserve to be there. The second question, which I've kind of already touched on, was how was your experience with learning online at LSE? Not the best. Generally, just sitting on your own doing uni in your bedroom at home is not the one, especially when you're a first year student and you don't know many people. It can be really, really isolating. The next question is, what was your favourite and what was your least favourite module? I think my favourite module would be a tie-up between two. So I did German with my degree this year. That was my outside option. So if you do a single honours degree at LSE, you can picked to do an outside option, and mine was in the German department. So I really enjoyed that. I had some fantastic teachers this year, and I was in a really small class, so there were only 3 other students and me. So I really like that kind of small group teaching, which I don't think you really get in the other departments, apart from languages, obviously. And then the second one that I really enjoyed was my stats module. Well, it's not called stats, it's called Introduction to Geographic Research Methods, but we did a whole half a term on stats, and learning to use data and stuff, and I really enjoyed that because it's quite similar to A-level maths. It was slightly stressful because sometimes data just does not do what you want it to do, but I did, on the whole, like, really enjoyed that module. The one that I least enjoyed, this is quite an easy one for me to tell you, was my sustainable development module. I loved first term because that was very like up my street in terms of, we were talking about the white saviour complex and aid and the dangers of aid and things like that, which I found really interesting. And then the second half of the term was looking at sustainable development from an economic standpoint. And basically what that has taught me is that economics and me are we're just not friends. Like, economic geography is just not my forte, but that's okay. I needed to do it to know for next year that those are definitely not the modules to take. Moving on to section 3, which is accommodation. The first question is, did you make friends easily in your accommodation? Yes, I did. I actually picked to go to Parsfield Hall, that's where I stayed last year, and it was definitely the right decision for me. The people who I met there were really similar to me, and I think in that respect I've made a really good decision. I was in household 2, so I was only really allowed to mix in my household because when I actually lived in London it was lockdown. And that's my only real experience of being in halls. The next question is, do you regret having a shared room? If you asked me this when we were in isolation, I would have 100% said yes. Looking back, it was definitely the right decision for me because it meant that I met people quite easily. And actually, I'm really close friends with one of my roommates from last year. However, when we were in isolation, there was very little provision from the university to try and support us with having classes at the same time and things like that. So I remember one evening I would have a class from 7 till 8 p.m, which also happened to be when we would get our dinner delivered, and I'd be there with my headphones in trying to focus on a class whilst I've got like 12 people behind me trying to eat their dinner. And I think that was really difficult because the boundaries kind of become blurred when you live in a shared room sometimes between what's your space and what is just like everybody's space. This was obviously worse, and like the reason that everybody was in our room was because there was a lack of communal spaces, and because they were all shut because of COVID. So yeah, in isolation it wasn't the best, but I also think the uni probably could have handled that slightly better. I think if I was to do things again, especially with COVID hopefully being better this year, I would definitely go for a shared room again. And the final question of this section, which I've already kind of answered, is would you recommend your accommodation? Yes, 100%. As I said, the people were lovely. The hall is really nice. It looks beautiful from the outside, which was quite a big thing for me. And Parsfield actually has a garden, which particularly in Freshers Week, when things were slightly more open, it was really nice to be able to go and meet the other households outside because that was actually legal at that point. Location-wise, Parsfield was also fantastic. It was literally 25 minutes to uni, and it was down one straight road, which, let me tell you, when I was in Freshers was a godsend because I did not have to Google Maps my way to and from uni every day. It's close to Tottenham Court Road, which in itself is incredible, and Oxford Street, West End, like honestly, wherever you could really want to go. Also, Covent Garden is only 10 minutes away. Like, location-wise, Parsfield is amazing. And the final section is just general questions. What was the best thing about first year and something you'll never forget? Easy answer. My Juniper Hall field trip. I've obviously vlogged the whole thing, which is up on my channel. It was the first time I really got to meet students from my course in person, because the only other time that I'd met any student from my course was on my first day at LSE when I had to go and register as a student, and it was done by department. So all the geography students went together, and then somebody said, let's go to Lincoln's Inn Fields and like have a picnic. It was such a short amount of time that you didn't really get to know people. Whereas when I went on the field trip, we obviously had 3 days and there weren't that many people, only I think 20 or so people turned up. So I got to know like some really lovely people on that trip. And it was, yeah, just a really fun time. And that was the only social experience I've really had this year. So I really valued that, to be honest. And the next question is, what was the worst thing about first year? Where to start? No, I'm joking. It wasn't all that bad, but it was a tricky year, and particularly the learning online stuff was really difficult. The workload is intense, like anybody who goes to LSE will tell you that. There's a lot of reading, a lot of work. Balancing it with a job as well is really quite tricky. And the other thing that I found hard, I think, was the social side of things. And I met some lovely people in Freshers Week, but you know how there's that saying, the people you meet in Freshers Week might not be like your closest friends at the end of first year. Because I only really met people in Freshers Week and the 5 weeks of Michaelmas term when we were in lockdown, and then at the end of the year, I didn't really have as much time to kind of like find and like meet new people. And so I don't feel like I necessarily met my people this year. I don't know, I met some, this is a really difficult thing because I know a lot of people who I am friends with will be watching this, and they are lovely, lovely people, but it has just taken me a bit of time to find my feet and find the people who I really resonate with. Like at school, when you're friends with people in year 7, you're not necessarily friends with them in year 9, and then you're not necessarily friends with them in year 11. I just haven't really had the chance to do that, kind of like meeting other people and kind of working out who my really close friends are. And the last question for today's video is, if you had the chance to choose again, would you choose LSE a second time? Now, this depends on when you ask me, because I actually got asked this question by somebody that I worked with back in, gosh, it would have been May, during the middle of my exams, and I said, absolutely no way. And she was like, well, why don't you just take a year out? Why don't you, like, I was really considering dropping out at one point this year, but she said, why don't you take a year out and just see what you can do for the year and then go back to it? And to be honest, I was just terrified about that idea because I don't think I ever would go back. Up until that point, I don't think I'd had a particularly good experience, and I actually needed to give it a little bit more time, because that's when I then had the field trip, and the field trip has really, really changed my mind. I'm really looking forward to going back next year, and I think I've realised that actually I just need to give it, not a second shot. It's kind of difficult to say like, oh, give it a second shot when you haven't really had a proper first shot at it, but I just need to give it a chance, basically. I'm moving back into London in September, and I think I just need to see how things go. It might be that I'm really miserable next year again, and I find that actually it's not for me and I should probably have dropped out earlier. But if I end up dropping out next year because I find it really bad, then so be it. I haven't lost anything through kind of like going back to London and trying it again, or like trying it for the first time, really. So positive mindset, go back into it in September, and hopefully COVID will be much more at bay and I'll be able to have a bit more of a normal uni experience. So would I choose LSE again? If you ask me today, yeah, I think so. I have met some lovely people and I have had a good time at the end of the day, but it's just been a bit of a rocky road to get to that point. That is all for today's video. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a bit waffly, a bit rambly, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. Next week's video will be a much more general like question and answer session, so do definitely stick around for that. If you're interested in that video, by the way, subscribe to my channel down below, and then hopefully it will come up in your subscriptions feed, and give this video a big thumbs up, because it tells me obviously like whether you're enjoying this sort of content or not. I will see you next time with a new video, but until then I hope you have a lovely, lovely week. Bye.